Round 2 of Sports Talk up next with your hosts Phil Kornblut, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. Don't leave us hanging. Join the show, 800-956-7266.
Welcome back to Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network, along with Professor Tom Hayes. Will Pelagic here with you. Phil Kornblut has the afternoon off. He's taking the weekend beginning early here, and we will keep you entertained here throughout the final hour of our program. We'll keep you updated on what's going on between Ole Miss and South Carolina. They're just underway at Founders Park. One out in the opening inning. South Carolina trying to, again, prove that it belongs amongst the NCAA tournament teams and the NCAA tournament hopefuls. Ole Miss, one of the top teams in the SEC West, one game out of first. South Carolina has won its last two series against LSU and Vanderbilt. Clemson tomorrow at home against Florida State, as they will play Saturday through Monday. And just as I say, South Carolina is trying to prove that they belong. Ole Miss's best hitter, Ryan Olenek, hits a solo home run off Logan Chapman, and Ole Miss has taken a 1-0 lead. So an ominous start at Founders Park for the home-siding Gamecocks. To Quail Hollow and Charlotte, where the leader is Peter Malnati at -7. The leaderboard as they finish up the second round of the Wells Fargo Championship. Couple of Clemson golfers in contention, Sam Saunders and Kyle Stanley at 3 under par. Tiger Woods will make the weekend, but he's right on the cut line at +2 after shooting 73 today. So not a good day for him. Among those who will miss the cut include Billy Haas, Kevin Kistner, Jonathan Bird, Russell Henley, Ben Martin, and Lucas Glover. We bring in another edition of Birdies and Bogeys with George Bryan III from, once again, we believe, north of the border. George, how are things in beautiful Canada?
Well, north. And it's absolutely gorgeous here. I'm on Vancouver Island. Whew. That's right on the Pacific, well north of what we're accustomed to. And I thought this was like the frozen tundra. But this is absolutely magnificent. I've never been to such a place, but I'm up here with a little bit of a surprise. We got several South Carolinians right here trying to get their Canadian PGA Tour card privileges on just absolutely a perfect venue. It's called Crown Isle. So that's a spot. I don't think many of us, very few folks listening, have any idea that 3 hours north of Seattle, weather is unbelievable. I mean, the Januaries are 45 degrees average. It's not the tundra like I thought. Everything's lush and green, probably as beautiful, almost like a very special island. But hey, Jake Levitt, he's from Blythewood. He's still an amateur from Elon. He's over here. Will not advance. A guy named Donald Adams. He played at Coastal Carolina. Struggled a little bit, won't advance, but these guys were pursuing their card. As right now I'm watching GB4, George Bryan IV. He's really roughing it today. Sorry for being quick, but I'm not sure that I can keep this. I'm on the golf course.
Right.
Just a little bit out of bounds.
Gotcha.
And probably illegal doing this live update. But, hey,
do we need to let you run, George?
No, I'm going to get to the South Carolinians. And William Rainey, my son-in-law, he's from Charlotte. Played at College of Charleston, though. He struggled a bit in this event, won't advance. He will not get privileges on the Canadian Tour this year. And then Shaw James from right there in Irma. Struggled a little bit, won't advance. So don't have good news for South Carolinians. However, what's really cool is they're in pursuit. And this place is unbelievable. Now, what I'll do is give me a little bit of an update. What's going on at the Wells Fargo?
So we have Peter Malnati, as I said, leading at 7 under par. Aaron Wise and Jason Day are both a shot back at -6. Paul Casey, Charles Schwartzel are in a group at 5 under par, 2 off the lead. Sam Saunders and Kyle Stanley, as I mentioned, they'll make the weekend and they're in contention. They're 4 back. Tigers at 2 over par. Among those who will make it just on the cut line, Ricky Fowler is at -1. The cut line basically is looks like it's going to be at either 3 over or 2 over. It'll be 3 over, actually. They were able to get it at least another shot over par there. So the top 69 and top 70 in ties are all at least in there. It looks like there's still a couple more guys out on the golf course. But just from your standpoint, I want to talk about Saunders as well as Kyle Stanley. Those are 2 Clemson guys who look like they're playing themselves very, very well at a course they should be familiar with.
Yeah, and they play it frequently, and their games suit that venue wonderfully. I've had the privilege of watching them play recently, and that golf course just sets up perfect. They both pound on that golf ball, and they are, when you know a golf course and it's home crowd, they got a home crowd advantage. It does make a difference. So But, you know, everything safety's off on the weekend there. I do like the fact that scores are bunched, and I wish I could be there. Hey, next week, though, I'm at TPC down in Jacksonville, Florida. I'll be hopefully some of those guys you just mentioned.
Exactly. I want to talk to you about something I heard this week with Tiger Woods. We were going to play some of his audio earlier this week, but ran out of time. He was talking about kind of moving his stuff to new irons and talking about the testing process with that. He basically said that he didn't want to take as many shots just because of the fact that he's still trying to work on where his game is at, where his technique is at, and where his form is at. And he was talking about trying to go with the right metal. Well, what can you tell me about when you're trying to switch irons and trying to, again, go with the right metal that suits your game?
Well, anytime these guys are finely tuned and their feel is hypersensitive when they, especially somebody like Tiger, his scoring clubs in particular, when they make a change, the metal they use, especially around the green, that affects the spin and then how it feels in the center of the club face. And so his distance control will likely be a little bit off. And that's one thing. I asked Jonathan Bird one time what the biggest difference in his opinion was. If he could nail down one thing as it comes to the full swing, what's the biggest difference? And he said distance control. The guys out here know how far they hit the ball. So when you talk about making a change, and especially irons, they need to know how far they hit it, the exact distance. Most people think they hit it all straight. They don't. These guys on the tour, they don't hit it all that straight all the time, but they know how far they hit it. And then they know the kind of spin they put on the ball. So that is, it's bigger than people think as far as changes. And hey, here's what I believe. If you got something you like and you know, and you're playing great, never change. Hey, Tiger didn't ask me what I thought he ought to do, by the way. Just so you know.
Well, previewing the weekend, up in Charlotte. Now, we've had some great, beautiful weather here, George. We're not envious of you up there in the Pacific Northwest. But we've been in like the 80s, right on the borderline of the 90s, and the conditions, I'll use a golf term, are sort of benign, not much breeze in the air. How does this golf course play, in your opinion, during this weekend if conditions stay the same?
Well, hey, they made some changes there with that, with the golf course, the contours on the green. If you tell me the conditions are dry and no rain, that means the superintendent's in control, the committee's in control. It will get tougher if they want it to be. So, but if it rains, the golf course gets easier. So, hey, I tell you, we've gotten rain out here, and it doesn't. But it's light rain. The conditions here are nowhere near what you guys are seeing out there. But hey, what the officials want are dry conditions. And is the forecast to rain or not, or do you know?
It's supposed to possibly do a little bit, maybe on Sunday, maybe in the morning, but again, not very much.
Hey, these great players, they want the ground wet because the ball doesn't roll, and they can control. They can control it through the air. They can't control that bounce. So I'm walked up on a rules official, man. He's going to shut me down. And until next week, tee him high, but shoot him low.
That's George Bryan. He gets in right under the gun as we do birdies and bogeys. I have a lot of questions for him next week when we get to TPC at Sawgrass, because it's one of my favorite courses, and it's a course where you don't see a lot of repeat winners because that course has claimed quite a many of the PGA Tour folks. But yeah, we hopefully weren't breaking too many PGA Tour rules with GB3 there, but hopefully we can get him in a better spot next week so he doesn't have to talk in such a hushed tone. We'll continue our recap of spring football across the ACC and SEC when we talk about what's going on with the Louisville Cardinals. Howie Lindsay joins us from CardinalSports.com. We return on Sports Talk. Sports Talk and South Carolina Radio Network as we return to our recaps of the spring football for the opponents of South Carolina and Clemson. We now focus on Louisville. CardinalSports.com's Howie Lindsay joins us. Howie, the heir apparent to Lamar Jackson, we hear, is a man by the name of Pass?
That's exactly right, and he's a big-time prospect. One of the top recruits that Louisville's had in a long, long time. The trouble was we haven't seen him because, of course, he was behind Lamar Jackson. So they think a lot of him. Now, everybody here calls him Puma. Now, I don't know if people in South Carolina are allowed to call him Puma, but we can call him Puma. So if you hear me say Puma, that's who I'm talking about. But his name is Jawan Pass. He's a big physical kid. Reminds me of a former NFL quarterback that came through Louisville named Dave Ragone. Big, wide shoulders, about 250 pounds. He's going to be real hard to bring down. Got a rocket for an arm. It's going to be a more traditional Bobby Petrino set. But, of course, anything's more traditional than Lamar Jackson.
I would say, is Puma based on his stature, his running ability? Well, what is that nickname based on?
I had asked him a long time ago when he was coming out of high school, and he said, my mom just called me Puma, and my grandma called me Puma, and everybody been calling me Puma ever since. He's an Alabama guy. He's got that real thick accent, and his brother's on the team, Kane, and so we got Kane and Puma.
Obviously, you mentioned it's going to look a lot more traditional. His arm, I'm sure, is something that people are very much dazzling to. Seeing the spring game stats and seeing kind of some of the highlights on him, they're very, very high on it. You're going to see, obviously, a lot more balance to this Bobby Petrino offense.
I think so. Bobby Petrino said the other day, it sounds like such a easy thing to say, but it was such a valuable comment. He said, we're going to have a running back lead us in carries. We're going to have a running back lead us in rushing yards. And that hasn't happened since Lamar Jackson walked on campus. I mean, he's that good of a rusher. In fact, I saw a stat that blew me away yesterday that Saquon Barkley, of course, everybody thinks he's a once-in-a-generation running back, and he's the best running back since whatever you want to say. He's a very good running back. Lamar Jackson had better stats as a runner than Saquon Barkley. More yards per carry, more total yards, and about 7 more touchdowns than Saquon Barkley did for his career. That's how good Lamar Jackson was. So it's a huge step. It's huge shoes for Puma Pass to step into in terms of passing, but it's an even bigger shoes to fill for all those Louisville running backs. I mean, Lamar, for all the times that he carried, including all the negative yards of being a quarterback, he still averaged over 6 yards a carry. Those are huge shoes to fill.
I know that one thing people are wondering about is who Puma will be throwing to, but he rocks into a wide receiver room that has a lot of people who are familiar faces to those who followed the Cardinals.
Oh, they're fantastic. Seth Dawkins is this big physical freak. He reminds me so much of former first-round pick Devontae Parker. He's got dinner plate-sized hands. Louisville's got some big dudes on their team. Mekhi Becton's 360 pounds. He's 6'7.5". Tariq Bateman is a 6'8" young offensive lineman. The biggest hands on the team is this kid named Seth Dawkins, who's only about 6'3.5". They had to get special order gloves because they just got these ridiculous mitts on him. He's a great young wide receiver, but probably the best. Jalen Smith's good as well. A big physical wide receiver, is about 225 pounds. The best receiver on the team is Des Fitzpatrick. He's just a redshirt. He'll just be a redshirt sophomore, but the scouts were absolutely buzzing about him at Louisville's pro day and pre-pro day activities. If Louisville's going to continue this kind of run that they've had of first round picks, Des Fitzpatrick might be that guy.
Talking to Howie Lindsay, of course, as we go throughout the spring recaps of both the South Carolina and Clemson opponents. We're focusing on Louisville today. Howie covers the Cardinals for Rivals.com. On the defense, it seems like every name that I see come about here, or every article I see mentions C.J. Avery. How impressive was he this spring?
He's good. He's good. Yeah, the defense, I don't know what to make of them. I really don't. They've got talent. C.J. Avery. They've got some young talent. They've got John Grenard. I think is good as well. They've got some young guys who are going to be filling in there. I think the world of G.G. Robinson on that defensive line. They've got some guys, but I don't know what it's going to look like. Brian Van Gorder is coming in and installing his system. I'm hopeful that it's going to be very effective, but we honestly just don't know.
It's obviously a situation where that's the kind of thing that hampered them down the stretch, and I know people are wondering, especially with where Clemson is and what they have coming back, it's almost a race for number 2. How does Louisville fare in that mix, do you think, after what you've seen so far?
Boy, I don't know. The trouble is, I think they'll fare well. Excuse me. But the trouble is, they're opened up with Alabama, and we saw what Bama did to Florida State. It was like they ripped their. What's that scene in Indiana Jones where he rips his heart out and shows it to him, and he's Ali Ma. That's what Alabama. I mean, seriously, that's what Alabama and Clemson can do to people, and Louisville's got to play both of them in the same season, in a time where they're replacing a Heisman Trophy winner. So I think there's a bunch of talent on this team. I just hope they don't get their spirit broken in that first game.
It's hard to even say. I mean, after the season that they had that was 8-5, does that mean that I'm not saying the seat is turning warm on Bobby, but have fans gotten a little restless after what they've seen?
Not that I've seen. I think everybody understands kind of what's going through. There was some frustration this past year that they didn't win more games with the talent that was on campus. They ended up having 5-6 draft picks, a couple of guys taken in the first round. There's some frustration this past year, but I don't think the expectations are such next year that if they lose 4 or 5 games again, that's going to be a major issue. I think people understand what they're up against.
Talking with Howie Lindsay, of course, Howie being on the recruiting front as well at Rivals.com. Who's one player on this class or in this incoming class here for the Louisville Cardinals that you expect to have the biggest impact going forward in this season?
Boy, that is a good question. Louisville is desperate for running back help, perhaps maybe at the running back spot. I tell you, I've gotten the sense really from the coaching staff that they're not opposed to playing a freshman at this point. Certainly they've played quite a few freshmen in the past, but they're at a point depth-wise where they genuinely like the guys that are coming back. So I tell you this, if they're able to redshirt the majority of this class, I'd be very excited about it.
Is that just because of the fact that there's just so much kind of in the cupboard already for them?
Yeah, and what's interesting is the recruiting classes have not been rated phenomenally on a national scale. They've been anywhere between about 28 and 35 or so nationally these last 2 or 3 years. But what's interesting about that is that's the best that Louisville's ever done. the highest ranked recruiting classes that Louisville's really ever had have all come within the last about 6 or 7 years. And so Louisville's talent level is getting better, even though Louisville's been a winning program for a long, long time. They've typically not recruited stars. And especially in Bobby Petrino's case, he's had a whole bunch of pros that used to be 2-star guys. And so I think they've got enough recruits on campus, enough guys who have been in these last several recruiting classes that they shouldn't need a whole lot of guys in this class. I think the future, if I could pick one future NFL player out of this class, it'd be Jordan Travis, the quarterback from South Florida. Louisville's had incredible success for the South Florida quarterbacks, of course, Teddy Bridgewater and Lamar Jackson. If he can continue, if he can be 80% of those dudes, I think Louisville's got a player.
Judging by the way you've spoken, Howie, it almost feels like the ceiling and floor are far apart as far as your expectations for what you see come the fall.
They really are. I mean, this Louisville team, certainly can't see them going undefeated. It's almost like I said, the Clemson and Alabama thing. I mean, goodness gracious, I can't see anybody beating them, either one of those two teams. So let's say you start off with those 2 losses. So Louisville could anywhere between 10-2 and 7-5, 10-2 and 6-6. I mean, it's a pretty wide stretch.
Before I let you go, I got to get a pick for the Derby because you're in Louisville. It's right there, ground zero for it.
Absolutely. We've been out at the track every morning this week. I get out there at about 6 a.m. and watch the horses run around and pretend like I know what I'm talking about. Oh, that one galloped really well. That one, ate all of his oat bag and all that kind of. So many people just straight up guess. So that's the caveat. This is a straight up guess. The favorites justify. He's the favorite for a reason. He's a beautiful horse, big, strong horse as well. He's done nothing this week to dissuade me from putting money on him. So I'll go Justify, Audible, and Mendelssohn. Those are my 3 horses. If you want a latecomer, it's that my boy Jack is a latecomer. I was talking with the Purdue coaching staff, actually, the Brown family up at Purdue, and they like my boy Jack. They're, of course, all down this week because of Derby. A couple other horses are out there. Bolt Doro's fine. If you like Usain Bolt, that's where he got his name from the speed angle. But I'm going Audible, Mendelssohn, and I'm putting Justify on the top of everything.
Love it, love it, love it. Howie Lindsay joining us from Rivals.com site that covers Louisville. Appreciate the time. We'll talk to you closer to the season.
All right, thank you.
That's Howie Lindsay. I'm Will Pelagic. The Full Monty on NASCAR is next on South Carolina Radio Network.
This
The latest on this weekend's race is around the corner. The full Monty on NASCAR is next. This is Sports Talk.
Welcome back to Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. As we turn our attention to the gentlemen of NASCAR, they are at the Monster Mile this week in Dover. The man who has the pole this week is Kyle Larson, Kevin Harvick, Martin Truex Jr., Kyle Busch, Ricky Stenhouse. Your top 5 in the qualifying for this weekend in the state capital of the first state, Delaware. But first, a recap of what happened last week here with our friend Monty Dutton, who joins us. MontyDutton.com is how you get in touch with him and his writing efforts as well. We also want to let you know South Carolina a 3-1 lead now on Ole Miss after Ole Miss had that solo home run on the opening inning. South Carolina counters with 3 in their half of the first. We'll keep you updated and abreast on that. But, Monty, first, your thoughts on what we saw last week in Talladega.
I saw a lot of people that were disappointed about the race. To me, it was people were bored by Talladega. It's all
it was like we're
happening anytime. But you know, it had, you know, it was almost like I don't know. It's sort of race fans are a tad hypocritical because they always get very angry if you suggest they like to see wrecks. But if there's not 10 of them, all of a sudden it's a boring race. So I thought it was about as much Talladega as I could stand.
About to say, I know we talked about this last week. You kind of bemoaned the skill that it takes out of the race, and I kind of bemoan the fact that, you know, they go to the green white checkered. It seems to create a bit of a manufactured finish, and you know, it just seemed like we got to the point where when they got them restarted, like you said, there was just no action. No one really wanted to make a move.
Yes, that was disappointing, and I think from watching the race, every time they go there, there's a new wrinkle that's a little bit different. And I think what hindered that race was that there's a little ebb and flow there, and people can work together. But by and large, the inside line of the draft had a distinct advantage. And I think that sort of undermined the, you know, that made people less willing to really go for it.
Joey Logano winning a race for the first time in almost a calendar year. Is he and his team finding their sea legs, or is just the fact that they like Talladega?
Well, I thought a lot about that the week before because that was the previous way. You know, Logano won in Richmond in the spring of 2017, and he was paralyzed. It didn't count for the playoffs, so he didn't make playoffs. And he basically hasn't. His team and they've been a shadow of themselves for the rest of the year and the start of this year. And I heard people talking about it, and they were saying that we just lost momentum. And I can't help think that that's ridiculous. We've never heard of going a whole year and not being able to regain momentum. I think the more likely thing is whatever they did wrong in that car that won at Richmond, and they got stopped from doing that anymore, it put them behind and it took them a long time to catch up. But Logano's young. He's a good driver. But, I mean, I just don't believe that he or his crew chief or anybody else were so devastated by whatever happened at Richmond that it took them a year to recover. I think that what took them a year to recover was probably not being able to cheat exactly that way.
Of course, looking at what the Dover starting lineup looks like, I'll ask you the particulars on the track in a moment, but just as we said, Kyle Larson, Kevin Harvick, Martin Truex Jr., Kyle Busch, Ricky Stenhouse, it seems like a lot of the usual suspects up at the front there, Monty.
Well, that's probably – Dover is a place where the usual suspects probably have an advantage. Larson has come close to winning there before. Chase Elliott back in 6th has come close to winning there before. But I think that, you know, places like Talladega and maybe a road course in Daytona and the short tracks where aerodynamics aren't quite as important, they sort of open the doors of opportunity a little bit. But Dover is high banked. It's not, you know, it's only a mile, but it's pretty fast and it's high banked. And I think aerodynamics becomes popular. And I think just it's a track where it's big enough and fast enough that the magic of the engineers starts to play a role. And so the people that have the best engineers have a little bit more of an advantage. And that's generally the way most of the season is.
In Dover, the participants this week, who does it favor? Who likes this track?
Well, Dover is Jimmy Johnson's best track. And historically, Hendrick Motorsports has been really great there. And I think the root of that is when Jeff Gordon was sponsored by Delaware-based DuPont. I think they put a lot of effort in putting on a show for the home folks. But the fact is based on practice and qualifying, Johnson, as he has for most of the year, has not seemed to have the advantage he usually automatically has at Dover, and the fact that he's certainly one of a handful likely to win. So I think it opens up a little bit. I think Kyle Busch is going to be strong. I think Harvick is going to be strong. I think that Larson could easily be a breakthrough. But there have been 10 races this year, and the Chevrolet has won one of them. And so they're getting better. They have a car on the pole. But I don't think Johnson is, you know, he's probably more favored to finish in the top 10 than he is to win.
You know, it's interesting. You keep mentioning Kyle Larson, and you know, he's kind of been playing the bridesmaid a lot this season and not really the bride. What has been kind of the thing that has kept him from, like you said, getting that breakthrough?
I think it's difficult to make a logical reason other than just the law of averages to catch up. But because you can't say that Kyle Larson is a bridesmaid because he won't go for the win, because he's a very aggressive driver. His profile as a driver is quite similar to that of Kyle Busch. And it's often these popular beliefs are not grounded in statistics. For instance, Kevin Harvick is nicknamed the closer, thinking he nails down every. But the fact is that Harvick is in his second a lot more times in his career than first. To me, it's almost you call him that so people start bugging him about the opposite. So, but I can't see why in the world Larson hasn't won more, and that's probably just something will come with time. But I'm not going to pick him because I have messed up a lot of picks by my anticipation of his blossoming into superstardom.
Understand. I'll get to your pick in a second. I do want to ask you about one more guy, Chase Elliott, who also, it seems like, has success at that track, albeit without that victory. 4 top 5s, probably the best track that he's had in a Cup career, that has 25 of those top 5s and 87 starts, but again, no wins.
Well, he's had an 8-second career and not one race. But I think in his great defense, you could make an argument that he was the best Hendrick performer last year and is that way this year. Chevrolets have a new model and they're getting up to speed. In his last year, Jeff Gordon won a race at Martinsville that was basically a consequence of two other drivers wrecking each other. Elliott's statistics were better last year than in Gordon's last year in the same car. And Elliott's statistics for Hendrick Motorsports are the best in the team. And one of his teammates is a 7-time champion. So I think he's really got it all. I like the fact that he owns up to it when he messes up. I like the fact that he's terribly disappointed when he doesn't win. And I think that I really just think that it's bound to come. And Dover might be the place.
Give me your pick real quick. We got less than a minute.
I mean, I pick Harvick. Terrible. I have a habit of I pick one guy who won and 4 people that I picked to win finish second. So this week I'm going to pick the guy who's starting second. How's that?
I'll do that when we'll keep you in mind when we look at that this weekend, Monty. Thanks so much.
I appreciate you having me, as always.
That's Monty Dutton joining us as we go over the Monster Mile for NASCAR. Still 3-1 USC as they play now in the top of the third inning at Founders Park as they lead Ole Miss. We'll keep you updated on that. We'll kind of tell you how they got their runs and also some new Hall of Famers in Clemson's Athletic Hall of Fame that we'll get to as well, and some other news and notes that we'll wrap up. And also we'll hear from Rusty Wallace about some of what's going on with NASCAR in his eyes as well.
These guys, they never sleep. Check them out on the web at SportsTalkSC.com. Now, more of Sports Talk on the South Carolina Radio Network.
Still 3-1 South Carolina as they play currently in the top of the third inning. Logan Chapman had what looked like a tailor-made double play right back to the box, but his throw to second base mishandled by L.T. Tolbert at second base, a little bit off the heel there, and now Ole Miss has the tying runs on base here with nobody out. Again, in the top of the third inning, 3-1 South Carolina. They got their runs on a well-placed single, basically to the right side. Looked like it could have been a fielder's choice ground out to tie the game, but no one was covering first base. And South Carolina scored the run and kept the bases loaded. Hunter Taylor with a two-out, two-run single that gives South Carolina a 3-1 lead now with one out in the top of the third inning. Some other kind of odds and ends here to talk about. I know that, Corn, you wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on with Logan Chapman and his curveball.
Well, yeah, he's a little bit high with it. And let's face it, you're flirting with disaster walking people. So you had a walk and an error. And then actually Ole Miss bailed you out because still early in the contest, why would you be bunting the runners over? And then he popped up the bunt, and that gives South Carolina an out.
Clemson inducted 10, or at least announced 10 inductions to its class of 2018 in its Hall of Fame this weekend. 9 athletes and 1 coach, including former baseball player Jeff Baker, former football player Jim Bundren, Gary Connor in men's soccer, Cormac Finnerty in track and field, the former basketball player Cliff Hammonds, Daniel Hepburn from volleyball, Linda Beth Hughes, women's swimming, women's soccer coach Tracy Leone, the first soccer coach at Clemson women's soccer, Marieke Ressing of women's track and field, and Rick Rudine of tennis, those who will be going in the class of 2018 for Clemson. Jim Bundren, again, a third-team All-American and first-team All-ACC in 96 and 97, a big left tackle, and tying a Clemson career record for consecutive starts by no lineman out of the mold of Mitch Hyatt, someone who you could basically place there and protect that blind side for Clemson.
Yeah, that's when Clemson really depended on its offensive line because what they do is they play tremendous defense back in Bundren's day, and they'd run the football.
Certainly,
and that's what they used to do.
Cliff Hammonds on that 100th anniversary team, first winner of the ACC's Skip Prosser Award, also was the MVP in 2008, 12th most points scored in a Clemson career, more than 1,400, and also first on Clemson's career list for most games played, a 4-year member of that big basketball team up through 2008.
When you remember the backcourt, I think he was with Vernon Hamilton, who was sort of like their scorer. And then one of my favorite names of front court players in the history of Clemson basketball, King Akimbala, who was like a rebounder and shot blocker for Clemson back in the day. But Cliff Hammonds, one of those guys that Clemson has had because of being overshadowed by mostly the Big Four in North Carolina, and then, of course, those years that Maryland was still in the league. Clemson has had some great guards go through there.
Certainly so. And in baseball, Jeff Baker, who made himself a pretty nice career, 11-year career in the major leagues, played with Colorado, the Cubs, Detroit, Atlanta, Texas, and Miami, a 4th-round pick out of Clemson. He was part of those College World Series teams that Clemson had in the early 2000s.
Somewhat, in my mind, not altogether overshadowed, but everybody talked about the can't-miss kid, and that was Khalil Green that he played with. But Jeff Baker, I think, I don't know if he still holds the record, but I think at one time he held a record of 50 home runs.
That's pretty big
for a Clemson player, and I think he did it in 3 years.
He's tied with 59, in fact, tied for the Clemson record for career home runs with 59. And again, he did it, like you said, in just 3 seasons. Earlier this week, Corn was over at the State House. They had a big event. They do it every year with the governor at the governor's mansion to celebrate NASCAR Day and celebrate, of course, NASCAR's ties in South Carolina and Darlington Raceway, with the race coming up, the Bojangles Southern 500 coming up on Labor Day weekend this year, as it always has been. I had a chance for Corn to catch up with Rusty Wallace and talk about an elusive victory that he never got at Darlington Raceway. Looks like we're getting to Rusty here in just a second. There.
really good at Darlington, and I never could close that deal. So it's an empty spot in my resume, and it bugs me. I went down here 3 weeks ago before I left on my big golf trip, and I rented the racetrack, and I got 8 car dealerships now in East Tennessee. And I brought all my car dealerships down here, all of my general managers and all our cars, and we filmed a really great TV commercial for our dealerships right here in Darlington. And it's on YouTube right now. If you go to the Rusty Wallace Auto Group, to YouTube, you can see a little snippet of what we did. And it was a lot of fun, but I had a great time running around this track. And it's, you know, if you win this place, it's something that people talk about forever. And I see these drivers going, I said, man, this track is my favorite. It's such an easy track. And I go, you know what? It's one of my favorite too, but I didn't find it easy. You know, that's where it's got its name, Too Tough to Tame, because you make one little mistake and that wall is going to bite you. And it does it every single time. You look up there in turn 3 and 4 now, and you see these veterans running around there, and you think, man, those are the veterans. Those are the smart guys. And they hit the wall. And then you take these young guys that are scared to death of the track, and they don't put one scratch on the car. And they tend to get through it. My son came down here, his first race, I think he finished 5th, and he just flew around this racetrack. I said, how'd you do that? He said, you told me I'm supposed to be scared of this track, and I was. I said, I wasn't going to tear that car up. Then he came down the following year, got all excited, and hit the wall. So, but it's a track that really takes a lot of respect.
How do you feel about the state of your sport right now?
Well, I think the state of our sport has been changing a lot. I mean, obviously it's shifted to a younger demographic. You know, I mean, I never thought in 1 year we'd see so many new guys come up. I never thought we'd see a young Ryan Blaney. We'd see a young Chase Elliott. We see, you know, Darrell Bubba Wallace in Richard's car. All these young guys, I'm saying. And then now the old guys were guys like Jimmy Johnson and Kevin Harvick. But they're still the veterans. And that's the reason they're mostly up front all the time. But boy, what we have 5 or 6 young guys just hit it all of a sudden. But so we got to be understanding that that's going to shift. You can't have the old guard forever and the way it used to be forever. So it's changing, and NASCAR is adjusting to it. Sometimes they're shortening the races up. Sometimes they're moving the times around. They're not as scared to change anything. I can tell you that right now. They're trying to adjust everything they can to make everybody happy. And one thing that Kerry alluded on, the money they're spending at these tracks, oh my gosh, $400 million at Daytona to turn it into a world-class stadium, $190 million in Phoenix, Arizona to make it one of the most beautiful tracks you ever seen, and over $100 million at Richmond they're spending right now building it. And I was here 3 weeks ago shooting my TV commercials, like I told you, for our car dealerships, and I personally witnessed all the new grandstands going in. They're just more comfortable. They're nicer for the fans. So International Speedway Corporation is the company that owns most of the tracks, part of NASCAR also. They're the ones leading this whole thing to make the fan happier and do the best thing for the fan. And so I think, you know, with all these facilities getting updated, it's just a good deal.
That is Rusty Wallace, the legendary NASCAR driver, again, talking about the state of NASCAR. And again, they're going to have to figure something out to keep the younger viewers interested. And, you know, I know it's good that they're getting a lot of fresh blood, but they need some more. They need some more of that, and they need to be able to promote it a lot better because, again, it has lost a lot of its market share.
Yeah, it has. But, you know, the thing about it is that they're in a difficult position in that they spread all over the country now. And then that sort of laid off some of those historic fans that remember, you know, just in the South where it grew. But it's just one of those things. It's a niche sport. Mm-hmm. What they have to cultivate is that niche and then build from there. One thing I like about Rusty Wallace, he sounds like he's still driving, because I say the athletes that are better and underrated at self-promotion are NASCAR guys, because I don't know how many times he mentioned his 8 car dealerships in Tennessee, but he did several times.
He's big on it. Carolina's gotten the first 2 men on here in the 3rd inning. They lead 3-2 on Ole Miss. Programming note, Corn will be at the finale between Clemson and Florida State, so we'll have a live coverage there on Monday and live coverage Wednesday at Spirit Communications Park for South Carolina's game with College of Charleston, the Chad Holbrook grudge match that we're calling it, of course. Have a good weekend. Keep up with all baseball with us on Sports Talk SC on Twitter. We'll talk to you on Monday.